Could you tell us what is the reason of this meeting today and what is the topic?
Well, it's to recognise something very important, which is the contribution that faith leaders, faith communities made as part of the Ebola response. I think most people are aware of how unique a challenge it was. It was an unprecedented health crisis, humanitarian crisis. And you know, people see images of the clinical response, you know, people in suits and the medical attention and the isolation units, etc. But what's not so clear is the impact that faith leaders had when they became fully engaged. I think one of the things that we've underlined today is that they were always engaged from the very beginning. They were there, very active, but in terms of impact, perhaps they were under-resourced. But certainly they weren't recognised by the international community, and they weren't engaged. They weren't sought out by the international community. And what we're saying is that was probably a mistake. And as soon as that was realised, that it's not just a clinical response to the crisis, it's a much bigger community-based response that can tap into the huge amount of trust that's been built up between the faith leaders and their communities. When that was realised and those faith leaders were engaged, suddenly it became a completely different response. That trust was transformed into responses that allow people to talk about the truth of the virus as opposed to myths, to address things like safe burials, so people weren't doing it secretively, that there was respect and dignity in burials, and that the imams, the priests, the pastors were able to give messages about not washing dead bodies, which they were able to use scripture in reference to the Bible and Quran to say, actually, no, there are precedents. Normally you would wash the body, but it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's a necessity not to wash the body, for example, because that would prevent the spread of the disease. So what we're recognizing here is that the engagement of faith leaders in a response like this is absolutely vital. The message here is not a message for West Africa, it's not a message for Ebola, it's actually a very universal message. And the lessons learnt from the Ebola response have an application and importance and a resonance for any humanitarian response. There's a methodology, if you like, there's a format. There's an early recognition that if you involve faith leaders and communities from the very beginning through preparedness, for example, you're going to find the response so much more effective. So we welcome any attention. We believe the report has some relevance, or a huge amount of relevance, and we recognise that it's not just the international aid communities, but it's those communities within Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, that need to be recognised for a tremendous effort.
Is it difficult to make faith leaders from different religious backgrounds working together?
I mean, if you're talking about globally, I think in certain countries there are issues. If there is a conflict, for example, that's a civil conflict that's sectarian, if it's, for example, Central African Republic, you have a kind of a Christian-Muslim divide. But actually, even there, you've seen how, through an interfaith platform, the imams and priests have got together and said, look, actually, no, this is not the way it has to be. In fact, this is not a religious conflict. It's actually about resources and being marginalized and political instability and, those sorts of things. And that actually, if we come together, we can actually calm things down quite a lot. So there's a message there from Central African Republic, but also, Sierra Leone, a country that's only just out of civil war. I mean, it was the ravages of civil war sort of 10 years ago, and yet there's a huge amount of tolerance in the country, and the faith leaders found it easy to work together because they knew each other, and there were significant levels of trust there already. So I think often we talk about religion being the cause of conflict. And of course it happens. Of course it is in some areas, but we very, very rarely hear the success stories of Christians, Muslims, Jews coming together to form a platform to say, actually, through cooperation, we can resolve this thing together.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.